Chapter 1772 Special Agent Ling. We are already close to the Arctic Circle, and it already gives one such a feeling of dire despair. It is really hard to imagine how the Fremons, who live in the actual Arctic Circle, survived the terrifying Ice Age. Luckily, they have always been used to the cold and are relatively good at keeping warm. If someone from the south had come here, they would basically be extinct by now, and even if a few had survived, they would have had a hard time enduring it. Zhang Yi looked up and saw the huge Beilongjiang River ahead. At this time, the Beilongjiang River was completely frozen over, and its size was indescribably larger than the Heron River in Tianhai City. From a distance in the sky, one could see a white jade belt spanning the border between the two countries. Deng Shintong used the communication device to send a message to the rescue team, and soon after, a figure appeared in the vast snowfield before everyone's eyes. From a distance, Zhang Yi's spiritual domain sensed a slight fluctuation in space, as if something was approaching them. He narrowed his eyes, but his intelligent optical device didn't pick up anything. But he could sense that it was not far away. Zhang Yi looked in that direction, and in a moment, there was a distortion of light in space. A snow-white figure slowly emerged. If it weren't for Zhang Yi's ability to sense space, he really wouldn't have noticed the other person's presence. It was a woman wrapped in a snow-white combat uniform. She was almost one with the snow and ice, with a transparent eye patch over her eye, only her face was a little cold. After seeing her clearly, Zhang Yi was a little surprised. Because she looked like she was not even 20 years old, still looking like a young girl. Soon the young girl came to the front of the group, and with a cold glance she swept over everyone in front of her, asking, "Which one of you is the boss?" Deng Shintong smiled and raised his hand, saying, "It's me." The girl did not know Deng Shintong's name. After all, both sides needed to keep this a secret. "Oh." The girl turned around, reached out, and took out a large remote control. After a bit of fiddling, Zhang Yi heard the sound of an engine roaring. Soon, a snowmobile shot out of the snowdrift and, after making a big circle, stopped in front of the girl. "This is my last mission. Boss, you've exposed my existence, so I can only leave here in the future. I hope you can arrange for me to go south. Damn it, you don't even know how much I hate this cold place." The young girl complained. Deng Shintong laughed, "Of course." The young girl glanced back at him, looked at everyone in the surroundings, and then confirmed, "There are so many of you, and you didn't bring any transportation?" Zhang Yi gave a faint smile and reached out to open the dimensional gate. Then, one snowmobile after another appeared before her. The snowmobiles that Liu Karen had personally modified were of the world's top performance level, and were hundreds of times better than the buggy-modified snowmobile the girl had. A space ability mutant? The girl's eyes lit up. Space ability mutants were extremely rare among mutants, and their abilities were top-notch. "No wonder," she exclaimed. Zhang Yi walked over and asked with a smile, "May I ask this young lady her name?" The girl glanced at Zhang Yi and looked away nonchalantly at Deng Shintong. She was only responsible for showing the way, and apart from her boss, she didn't really like dealing with insignificant people. Deng Shintong hurriedly said, "This is the leader of our operation, that is, my boss. So you must try your best to satisfy his requests." The young girl then turned around and extended her hand directly at Zhang Yi. Zhang Yi shook her thickly gloved hand. "Big boss, you can call me Ling," Zhang Yi said with a smile, "and you can call me Chaos." Upon hearing the word chaos, the girl's eyes widened even more. "You are Chaos?" Zhang Yi laughed. "Why, have you heard my story too?" Ling nodded. "Even if you don't want to hear it, I'm afraid it's hard to avoid. In recent times, your name has spread all over the world." Zhang Yi frowned slightly. "This is not a good thing for me." He was not a person who liked to be in the spotlight, but to be low-key, his strength would not allow it. Ling said, "I didn't expect such a formidable figure to come on this mission." She suddenly smiled at Deng Shintong and rubbed her fingers together. you didn't say at the beginning that this job was so difficult, and I'm asking for a pay rise." When it came to money, she looked a lot happier. The indifference on her face disappeared in an instant. Deng Shintong said with a smile, "Of course," and his gaze became serious, "as long as you help us successfully complete the mission in Fremons this time, your pay will be super doubled." Zhang Yi and the others still did not choose to use the space shuttle. Having arrived in an unfamiliar land, he wanted to ask Ling for a lot of local information. Moreover, the space shuttle was too fast, and they might encounter some unexpected trouble along the way. If they were not careful, they might directly run into the mechanoid army, and then they would have to fight in a hurry. Zhang Yi did not dare to underestimate mechanical civilization. Even Karen City could be breached, and Zhang Yi did not dare to think that his team would be stronger than the pantheon of Fremons. What's more, Alexei's reminder still echoed in his ears. "Miss Ling, please take us to the Far East region. We want to find the location of the mechanical army. If you know something, please tell us." Zhang Yi smiled and invited Ling to sit in his snowmobile. Ling glanced at Zhang Yi's luxurious snow silver fox and her eyes immediately lit up. In the far north, if you go out without a snowmobile, it's the same as committing suicide. Therefore, transportation is extremely precious here. Zhang Yi's snow silver fox, if placed here, would be equivalent to the top-of-the-line Rolls-Royce before the end of the world. Ling was a little moved, but she looked at her off-road vehicle-modified snowmobile with some reluctance. Zhang Yi casually stored it in his own dimensional space. "I'll store your things away first, so as not to expose our trail. After this matter is over, I'll give you an even better one." Ling turned to look at Zhang Yi, and in an instant, her expression brightened. "Big boss, you really are a good person." In no time at all, Ling was sitting in the driver's seat of the Silver Fox in the snow, her hands gripping the steering wheel as she excitedly sped across the vast snowfield. "Oh ho! This car is really something, whether it's horsepower or chassis stability, it's not comparable to the rubbish I was driving before." Zhang Yi was sitting in the passenger seat, with Lian Yu and Flower in the back. As for the other non-combatants in the family, Zhang Yi did not let them out, but instead kept them all in Mu Yan's shadow space. Zhang Yi shrugged helplessly as he looked at the excited Ling cars. Nowadays all have very powerful artificial intelligence, and autonomous driving is only better than human. But the steering wheel has been retained on most models. It's just that some people still want to experience the joy of manual driving. Zhang Yi's gaze fell to the side of Ling's body, where a strip of something was wrapped in a white cloth. A gun? Or a cold weapon? Zhang Yi didn't ask any more questions. To move around here, you definitely need to be able to defend yourself. Ling's combat effectiveness shouldn't be bad, but Zhang Yi only needs her as a guide to give directions. While on the road, Zhang Yi asked her about the Fremons. "We are here this time to investigate the mechanical civilization here. Do you know anything about this?" Ling took a moment to reply, "The information I know has long been sent to the boss in the car behind for money exchange. How could I possibly hide it myself?" Money exchange refers to the exchange of some important strategic resources. Zhang Yi said, "Do you know that there are humanoid creatures among those mechanical legions?" "Huh?" Ling turned her head and looked at Zhang Yi with a face of surprise. "What humanoid creatures?" Her delicate little face was full of confusion. Zhang Yi looked at her calmly, "Creatures that look like people." Ling shook her head like a rattle. "Boss, I just came here to work for money. I work hard to collect a little information to sell to the boss behind me. Every time the mechanical army moves, I also observe from a distance with my equipment, or wait until they are done fighting to go over and collect something useful." She waved her hand forcefully, "I won't risk my life." Saying this, she forcefully swung the steering wheel. Watch my 720-degree U-turn." Under her control, the Silver Fox in the snow spun around several times in place like a top, before swaying and continuing towards the front. Zhang Yi and Lian Yu, both practiced drivers, managed to grab the handles in time and were not carried around. Flower, who had been sleeping on Liang Yu's lap, was suddenly thrown onto the lathe, and angrily growled meow at Ling. Ha ha ha. It's no wonder it's a good car, it's exhilarating to drive. My old car could only go up to 60 miles per hour at most, just like a cow cart. Hey, kitty, hold on tight when you ride in your sister's car. Ling turned her head back, sticking her tongue out at Flower, then she lifted one leg and put it on the steering wheel, driving with her foot. The temperature inside the car was very comfortable. Zhang Yi and the others were wearing combat uniforms that were not bulky, just the style of regular clothes, and could automatically adjust the temperature, so the car did not seem crowded. But Ling's combat uniform was not as high level. So when she got in the car, she took off the thick layer outside, and she was actually only wearing shorts on her lower body. At this moment, she raised her leg, her two smooth calves in white socks, recklessly stepping on the steering wheel, and she was actually very dexterous at maneuvering. Zhang Yi glanced at her and really did have very white legs. Well, he meant the socks. Haven't you seen it before? Zhang Yi rested his chin in his hand and looked at Ling, who was leaning on the steering wheel. Her big toe, separated from the other toes inside her white sock, locked onto the steering wheel as she excitedly controlled the direction of the car. If even you haven't seen it before, it seems that the humanoid creatures that Alexei mentioned are not very common. Suddenly, Ling's expression froze, and she seemed to have thought of something as she looked up and muttered, "Something that looks like a person? Is that considered a person?" Zhang Yi hurriedly asked, "Did you think of something?" Ling glanced at Zhang Yi and smiled playfully, "I don't know if that thing can be considered a person. It's just that, I did see something very interesting once when I went out to collect information." She rubbed her fingers together in front of Zhang Yi, making a classic gesture, "But this piece of information is very expensive." Zhang Yi smiled unkindly, "Money is not a problem, as long as your information is of sufficient value." With that, he casually took out a glass container from dimensional space and threw it to Ling. "This is the purest energy extracted from yuanstone veins, and it is now widely used in all aspects of Tianhai City, including large-scale city defense weapons." "What is this?" Ling curiously took the bottle and looked at it from all sides. "The purest energy. If you exchanged it for food, it would be enough to feed you for a year. You personally won't be able to use it, so take it and exchange it with any power you find." Such pure energy was hard currency in this era. For Zhang Yi, such things had long since piled up into a small mountain in dimensional space. After all, he had 70% of the Yuan stone veins under the Qinling Mountains in his hands. Of course Ling didn't doubt who Chaos was. His name was the best gold signboard. "Thank you, boss, you're so generous." Ling smiled and slipped the glass bottle into her backpack under the seat. Then she said to Zhang Yi, "Let me add your contact ID." Zhang Yi displayed his contact ID QR code and let Ling add him as a friend. Just a moment. After Ling fiddled with it for a while, Zhang Yi soon received a video from her. The beginning of the video was shot from a distance, and was even a little blurry. It was filmed from a snowy mountain. The camera gradually zoomed in, and a city filled with smoke appeared. At this time, the city had been almost completely destroyed. The city was full of the bodies of soldiers, as well as the legions of machines that Zhang Yi had seen before. Those huge super-large robots that looked like city walls, as well as smaller robots that were at least 4 or 5 meters tall, were busy destroying the city and then began digging underground. The camera panned from side to side, and suddenly there was a blinding flash that momentarily blinded the camera. A few seconds later, the picture slowly began to return to normal, and the camera turned to where the light source was. Zhang Yi saw a group of human mutants parachute from the sky and land in the center of the city. They were wearing thick gray combat suits, and just from the material of the clothing, you could tell that they were not ordinary combat troops. The intelligence system that Zhang Yi had with him immediately gave a prompt about what was on the screen. The clothing these soldiers are wearing comes from Fremon's Special Operations Unit, the Krupa. Fremon's human genetics are very well developed. After the end of the world, they used genetic technology to cultivate many powerful mutants, many of whom joined the Krupa unit. Among them, the best mutants even joined the Pantheon, which represents the highest echelon of mutants. Zhang Yi asked, "Can you determine the identities of these people?" "They need to be judged based on their abilities. The database does not have a complete grasp of the Fremon's mutants." Zhang Yi also knew that the information on the top mutants in each country was top secret. He didn't ask any more questions, but continued to watch the screen.